Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, February 28th, the end of the month. We have a lot to get into today. We are going to go over some big news surrounding Matthew Stafford. He has officially, or reportedly, I should say, come to terms on an agreement for a contract with the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll talk about what that means for the Rams, for Stafford, for the Raiders, and for the rest of this offseason, as well as going over the combine highlights from day one that saw the defensive linemen, defensive edge players, and linebackers go out and run some drills. Then we'll talk a little bit about Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, of course, the two-way phenom coming out of Colorado. Can he do it in the NFL? What are some prior examples of that before finishing off our show with our continuing series, taking a deep dive into what the perfect Packers offseason might look like and what the Pirates did to improve on their team from last year as they continue to build around Paul Skeens and that rotation. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, February 28th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic, which has to do with Matthew Stafford. Now, the wording of this is very specific. Matthew Stafford and the Raiders have come to an agreement on terms for a contract. Now, that doesn't mean by any means that he's going to sign a contract, that he is already on his way over, and that a trade has been done. All it means is that they have come to an understanding. They have come to the number that would be offered if he were to be traded to the Raiders, and they've found a common ground, have had a good idea of what that compensation might look like if he does end up donning the Raiders black and silver next season. The reported offer is sitting somewhere around $60 million, so near the top of the league where you're sitting with Dak Prescott, who currently has the NFL record at $60 million a year. Now, of course, this comes a little bit after the report that Matthew Stafford met with Tom Brady coincidentally at the same ski resort in Montana. Now, that's a little bit up in the air, but we're willing to let that slide because this is not anything that can get done without the Rams agreeing to a trade. So half of it is done. It's like what happened with Brandon Ayuk last year with the 49ers, except it's the opposite way. The 49ers found trade partners. He didn't agree to terms on contracts, so it all fell apart. So they're going the right way about this. Matthew Stafford was given permission to go and find a place to go and get paid. Right now it's up to the Rams and the Raiders to find the terms of a trade agreement. Now, most people would agree that this trade agreement would most likely have to have the 6th overall pick in this year's NFL draft in it. That's probably what the surrounding centerpiece would be. The more interesting part is what would come around it, because you're not going to get Matthew Stafford, even at age 37, for just one first-round pick. You might have to throw in a third, maybe a fifth as well. Maybe you have to throw in a player in there. I'm not sure how that would work with the Raiders. The Raiders, of course, when it comes to cap space, this is a Raiders team that has the second most in the league. They've got $96 million. So they have a wealth of riches. They have the ability to go out and pay Matthew Stafford whatever he desires. And this is something that I don't know how well it would work in the short term. Matthew Stafford is a short-term quarterback. He would fit the definition of a bridge quarterback for the Raiders, for really any team that brings him in, because at 37, you're not expecting him to be your franchise guy. You're not expecting him to come in and play for 4, 5, 6, 10 more seasons. That would be ridiculous. He's a guy that you can count on for 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 seasons maximum to play out the rest of his career. But if you're the Raiders and you can bring in a elite quarterback like Matthew Stafford, if you're the Raiders and you can continue to you can try and build a culture, this is not necessarily the worst move. It's going to depend on what they have to give up. But the Raiders have been desperate for a quarterback now for a very long time, really ever since they got rid of Derek Carr, and even a little bit at the end of that Derek Carr era. They've just been that last team out in back-to-back seasons on getting a quarterback. They were left with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew last season. Didn't really work out too well from them. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to go and try and get Matthew Stafford. But the more interesting part, I think, comes with the Rams side of things. If this deal were to be made, who's going to be the next quarterback? We talked a little bit in past episodes this week about what that transition might be, who the next quarterback is. Right now, the only quarterback on the roster that is signed and under contract is excuse me. There's no real quarterback signed under roster for the Rams right now, right? This is a team that has a free agent in Jimmy G, who was their backup last season. Jimmy G comes out, and I don't know what kind of money he's expecting to get. He probably isn't expecting to get much, but the Rams have said they're comfortable with him being their quarterback going forward. So that's a potential target. Another one, the top quarterback on the free agent market by a lot of teams' estimate in Sam Darnold. Him and Jimmy G, for my opinion, are the same tier of quarterback. You look at those guys, you're not going to get a huge jump up from anybody. You're not going to get a huge jump up from any of those guys if they come in and they're going to be your starting quarterback, right? They're not going to be a ceiling raiser. They're just going to do what you need them to do, and if you have a good offensive line, which the Rams need to put some money into, those two will be fine. And the other one that's a little bit interesting is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers reportedly would take a pay cut to play with the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, a team that he is very interested in playing with, his number one option, and it makes sense, right? You're looking at a team outside of the Jets that's set to make a Super Bowl run, to be a good and competitive team when it comes to the future in the NFL, at least especially in the short term. You're replacing a 37-year-old quarterback with a 41-year-old quarterback, and then probably finding a succession plan, whether that comes at number 6, comes with Stetson Bennett, who's under contract right now, comes with Jimmy G, comes with any of those young quarterbacks you want to take a chance on later in this year's draft or even in next year's draft. This would be, again, a bridge type deal. It seems like the Rams are saying that their Super Bowl window is 2 to 3 years long, and they're not looking at paying a premium at quarterback because they can put in Jimmy G and they can be fine. We've seen them be successful with a Jared Goff type, like a Jimmy G, like a Sam Darnold. So they're not trying to pay a premium. But if they can get a premium quarterback, which is what pushed them over the edge with Matthew Stafford, that would be pretty cool. That would be good for the Rams. I don't see it happening. I don't really see it happening that the Rams spend big on Sam Darnold, because I think they say we have Sam Darnold at home in Jimmy G and they can get him for cheap. If they decide not to go with that archetype of quarterback, a quarterback that if you get him in the right system with a good offensive line is going to do wonders for your team, Aaron Rodgers is really the only other option. And the real question then becomes, are you willing to put such a polarizing figure in your locker room? A guy that is so strongly opinionated, a guy that has caused rifts in multiple locker rooms that he's been in now. It's a big question. It's something you don't want to mess with, the locker room in the NFL. I think at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers, if this trade is done, comes over to the Rams, and that's probably the best succession plan for Matthew Stafford. But if he decides that he doesn't want to, or if the money they're offering isn't good enough, Jimmy G, I really do think, is the next best option. It's not going to be a home run hit, but if you grab Jimmy G for, I don't know, backup money, $10 million a year, you can put a lot more money into the offensive line. And that would be massive for them. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Matthew Stafford ends up getting traded to the Raiders? What would it take? Do you think that's a good move for the Raiders and Matthew Stafford? Do you think who do you think the next quarterback's going to be for the Los Angeles Rams? I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NFL Combine. The Combine Day 1 has come and gone. We're going to talk about the standouts from the defensive line, the edge rushers, and the linebackers in yesterday's Combine. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, February 28th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over Matthew Stafford, his potential future with the Raiders or the Rams. In this segment, we turn our attention to day 1 from the NFL Combine. The NFL Scouting Combine started yesterday, Thursday the 27th. We're going to talk about some of the standouts from the linebackers, defensive tackles, and defensive ends that participated in the Combine on Thursday. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, February 28th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of the NFL Combine. We saw the big boys go, the linebackers, the defensive tackles, and the defensive ends. And this is a class, especially at the defensive tackle position, that is very very deep, right? There were a lot of the top guys that, of course, didn't participate. We're talking about your Abdul Carters. We're talking about, the top guys in your class. And that's going to happen in the NFL Combine. This is more for mid-first rounders and later that get invited, that are interested to come in and improve their draft stock. And we absolutely saw that from a couple of guys, especially from Shamar Stewart. Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart was already known to be a freak athlete. But what he did in the Combine yesterday was insane. When you look at his relative athletic score, his RAS, he had the third best scores, not in the Combine this year, but of all time at the NFL Scouting Combine. His measurements, his athleticism, his jump, his speed are insane. This is a guy that is going to be climbing up draft boards. He's going to be like your Trayvon Walker. He's going to be like your Anthony Richardson. These guys that are just freak athletes that show off at the Combine and climb up draft boards because of that. Shamar Stewart is probably flirting with top 10. He was sitting in the mid-teens, anywhere from probably 13 to 18-ish. If he hadn't shown up at the Combine, he was still an elite prospect that everybody knew was a freak athletically. But Shamar Stewart, what he's done this year in the NFL draft, I think absolutely has vaulted him up to a fringe top 10 pick. I wouldn't be shocked if he went around pick 8-ish at the earliest. This is still a lot. There's still a lot of time for players to rise and fall, but Shamar Stewart is a guy that's going to be a big riser this offseason as the scouting stuff continues to go on. Another guy that really impressed me was Derek Harmon out of Oregon. He's a fringe first round guy. He's a guy that was mocked maybe at the end of the first round. Maybe he's a guy that was going early second round, but he at over 300 pounds was moving like he was 270 pounds. He had a sub 5-second 40 time, the only defensive tackle in the class to do it. He had the fastest 10-yard split. He's explosive. He is someone that looked really fluid when he was going through the 3-cone drill and the bag drill. He was doing an amazing job all combine long. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, not sure if it by itself is going to be enough for him to move into the first round, but he's a guy that was already on the fringe, and he did nothing but help his case to make it in the first round of this year's NFL draft. Another guy in the first round is James Pierce Jr. James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee was mocked to be potentially the number 1 overall pick this year in the way too early mock drafts, right? That they do right at the beginning, right after the drafts end, like they'll do at the end of this draft cycle, right? But James Pierce Jr. is a bit of an anomaly when it comes to his position. He's got weird measurements. He's got short arms. He doesn't really have lower body strength. But what he's been able to do is be extremely fast, extremely explosive, and he's been extremely productive at a top-tier school like Tennessee. Going up against SEC competition is generally a good way to measure. Now, he's a guy that is kind of up in the air. I've seen him mocked as high up as number 6 in the draft. I've seen him mocked as far down as number 23. I've heard some people say that he's going to fall completely out of the first round. James Pierce Jr. looked amazing in this year's combine. He's someone that I don't really know what's going to happen with him. James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee is a dangerous player, but he's a guy that people have questions about because he's got short arms, because he's a little bit heavier, because he's someone that, just looks like not the expected way you would expect a guy at his position to look. But James Pierce Jr. with a great showing at the combine this year should help his draft stock, should at least keep him in the first round. Some guys that probably aren't going to be in the first round but really showed out. Donovan Ezuraku out of Boston College, the linebacker. He was first place by a mile for edge rushers for the shuttle and the three cone drill. He went out there and just looked agile. He was fast. He was quick. He had some burst. He's a guy that absolutely helped his draft stock. Still probably not going to go in the first round, but a late day, an early day 2 pick is completely possible. And another guy, Tonka Hemingway, for defensive tackles, he looked pretty good. Second in the 20-yard shuttle and the three cone drill for the defensive tackles. He's a guy that's going to be able to show some burst, some athleticism. His footwork is pretty good. And Tonka Hemingway, just a fun name out of South Carolina. Again, probably not a guy that's going to go in the top in the first round, but he is for sure a guy that when we look at combine performances, someone that's stuck out. There were some guys that didn't look as good as we wanted them to, right? Especially when we look at their speed. But one guy that did is Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. Third place in the 40 drill with a 4.52. Jahad Campbell also with a top tier 10-yard split, also third, but just .01 behind the 2 guys ahead of him. Jahad Campbell, arguably the best linebacker in this class, but he's an explosive athlete. Jahad Campbell is. He tested pretty well in just about everything, and he had another really good combine. Second place in the broad jump, jumping 10.7. The 3 cone drill, really good in as well. He's just a monster, and I think he had an amazing combine. Overall, there's a lot of good. There was also some bad, of course. There's always some bad in there, but overall, a lot of these guys raised their draft stock. There weren't too many guys that were projected to go super high that didn't look great. Jack Campbell is someone that didn't test particularly great, but outside of him, a lot of the first-round guys, a lot of the guys that were expecting to go super high up were not at the end of the day hurt too badly by by the drills in this combine. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think was the best in this in day one of the combine? We'll keep an eye on it over the weekend. We are going to do updates for everything on Monday that happened at the combine. Potential records being broken. Isaiah Bond said he was going to try and break the 40-yard dash record set just last season. We already had records broken at the bench press. 49 reps of the bench being done by 49 reps at the bench done already, a new record. We'll see what happens as these athletes just continue to get better and better every single year. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to Travis Hunter, one of the most intriguing prospects in NFL history, to be completely honest with you. He's a guy that's expecting to play both ways. Two ways in the NFL, 100% of the snaps at cornerback and wide receiver, from what he says. We're going to compare him, if it's possible, to some of the two-way players in the past in the NFL, see if it's even possible to do. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, February 28th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over what the highlights of the NFL Combine Day 1 were, with the linebackers, defensive ends, and defensive linemen taking their turn at the Combine drills. In this segment, we turn our attention over to Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, one of the most intriguing prospects in NFL history right now, a guy that's going to go in the top 5, potentially number 1 overall, a guy that has the ability to maybe play both ways at the NFL level. We'll talk about if that's possible in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or, if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen. Breaking news real quick before we get too far into this, because I do apologize about this. We have some breaking news. Where is it? There. Anyway, breaking news. Matthew Stafford I know we talked about him in the first segment here today, but Matthew Stafford has officially restructured his contract and reached an agreement with the Los Angeles Rams. He is back this season, the first significant offseason domino, as reported by Adam Schefter. Rams and Matthew Stafford reach agreement today, restructured his deal, keeping him in Los Angeles, and quashes any and all trade speculation per sources. So discount everything we talked about in that first segment. We'll get into it a little bit here some more, actually. He's no longer going to the Raiders. All of that news coming out around Matthew Stafford is just rumors. Matthew Stafford, contract completely restructured. Matthew Stafford is now slotted to make a huge amount of money in the NFL. We're still waiting on the actual numbers to come out here, but now the Raiders need to turn their attention elsewhere. That is the first big domino, right? The Giants now know that they're not getting their guy. Now we look at a potential trade up for the New York Giants. Now we look at a potential for the Raiders to go and trade up here. This is huge for the Rams. I don't think it makes it did. I never thought it made a lot of sense for the Rams to move off of Matthew Stafford. But Matthew Stafford is someone that is, like I've said before, time and time again, a top 8 quarterback in the NFL. Matthew Stafford is someone that, as I've said before, is going to continue to be a great quarterback, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. And it never made any sense for the Rams to move off of him in the way that they did. I'm happy that this deal came through now. So congratulations to Matthew Stafford and the Rams. This was the best decision for them. This was the best decision for everybody involved. Sucks for the Raiders. It seemed like they really thought they were going to get it done. Instead, we're looking at Matthew Stafford coming back to the Rams. The deal has not yet been finalized, but it should be done shortly, reported from Ian Rappaport just now, but he is back. So that's big news. Matthew Stafford officially returns to the Rams, and the best quarterback that could potentially get moved this offseason is officially staying at home. But like I was saying, we're going to get into Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is, of course, one of the most intriguing prospects in this NFL draft cycle, right? He's someone that has played two ways as great as you can. He won the award this season for the best defender. He was in the running for best wide receiver. He is incredible, right? He is a guy that has potentially the ability to go and be a true two-way player. We haven't seen a true two-way player since the 1940s with Sammy Baugh when he led the league in passing and in interceptions as a defensive back in 1943. He also led the league in punt yards that year. That was, of course, not really the same kind of football that they play now. But still, we haven't seen true two-way guys since the 40s, since the 30s, since before World War II was over, right? There have been a couple of examples that have done it for a little bit, but not over the course of their career. Of course, Deion Sanders did a little bit of both. Deion Sanders, one of the best athletes in the history of our planet, played baseball, played football at the same time. Went out there, was one of the best corners in the history of the game, but also played receiver for a season, right? He was on special teams. He had 60 receptions over his career. He didn't really do it full time, but he is someone that has the ability and has played a little bit of two ways. And of course, you can always look at defensive tackles. You can always look at your little trick plays, your Dontari Poes, your J.J. Watts that's caught a couple touchdowns, your Mike Vrabels that have caught a couple touchdowns, your Refrigerator Perrys who started off as a defensive tackle, moved over to fullback. These guys that are big and just can truck through everybody. I don't really count them as true two-way players. The couple examples that I think really fit are Deion Sanders and Troy Brown. Troy Brown was a Pro Bowl wide receiver with the New England Patriots in the early 2000s, right? He also, later in his career, switched over to the defensive side of the ball when they needed him to and led the team in interceptions. Troy Brown, I think, is as close to the two-way player that you're going to get. Now, Deion Sanders could have been it, but he never really went full-time. Travis Hunter, the Colorado superstar, has said that he plans on playing both ways, or he wants to play both ways 100% of the snaps at cornerback and wide receiver, which, of course, is just saying he doesn't want to do a full-time corner with a couple packages at wide receiver. He's not saying he might be saying it, but he's not actually going to go out and play 100% of the plays in a game. That would be ridiculous. Nobody can do that. What he can do, and what I truly believe he has the ability to do, is play this two-way role. Play full-time corner, full-time wide receiver, but not at 100%. The speed of the NFL, the ability for him, and he has the motor that I don't think anybody else in the league has, especially in his rookie year. He might have the ability to do it. Now, it depends which team drafts him, right? The Patriots, they could use both. The Titans, they could use both. A lot of these teams at the top could use a corner and a wide receiver. The question is, will they allow him to? It's very unorthodox, and a lot of teams, as we've seen in the past, as we've seen with multiple other sources around sports, around the NFL, around baseball, around everyone, saying we don't want to change things. It's unorthodox. We don't like it. Do I think he has the ability to? Absolutely, he does. He's won awards for wide receivers. He was one of the top wide receivers in the country. He's won awards for being a defensive back. He's one of the top defensive backs in the country. He is a prospect like we have never seen in the NFL. And for someone to just discount him and say you can't do it both ways, it literally does not hurt to try. It's impossible to know if you don't give it a shot. Give him a shot to do it in the preseason. Give him a shot to do it in training camp. Give him a shot to do it before it really counts. And if you decide then that he can't, then that's fine. Have that conversation with him and make that decision. But if you are a team that drafts him and he says, Travis Hunter, you're only going to play wide receiver, or Travis Hunter, you're only going to play cornerback, you are limiting a man with unlimited potential. You are limiting a person, a player that has the ability to do something that we've basically never seen done at the highest level be done. It would be stupid to draft him with such a high pick and then say you're only going to play on one side of the ball. At least give him a shot in training camp. At least give him a shot in preseason to see how it goes. And then you can make a final decision. But just don't count it out right away. I think plenty of teams could use him going both ways, and I think if anybody can do it, it would be him. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the Green Bay Packers. What does their dream offseason look like? They finished last season with a wild card loss to the Eagles. They've been talking about banning the tush push. What are they going to do this offseason? What's going to happen with Jair Alexander? We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, February 28th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over what happens with Travis Hunter. Will Travis Hunter be a two-way player at the next level? We talked all about that. In this segment, we turn our attention to our continuing series, The Perfect Offseason, a dream offseason. Today, taking a look at the Green Bay Packers. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, February 28th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Green Bay Packers and what a perfect offseason might look like for them. This is a Green Bay Packers team that went 11-6 last season, finished third in their division at 11-6. That was a stacked NFC North last year. And like we said, lost in the wild card round to the Philadelphia Eagles. They got absolutely stomped. They couldn't get anything done offensively. They turned the ball over a couple times, and they just got absolutely demolished. They have a pretty middling amount of cap space, sitting at $48 million, good for 14th in the NFL. But the Packers also have one big question. What are they going to do with Jaire Alexander? It's come out that Jaire Alexander is expected to ask for a trade, expected to be on the trade block. Jaire Alexander is due $24 million against the cap this season. That would raise their cap space all the way up from that 14th spot in the league. If they add that $24 million back to it, they raise their cap number all the way to $74 million. That would be good enough for right behind the Cardinals. Cardinals who have $78 million. That would be good enough for top 6 in the NFL. That would be 6th place in the NFL. That would be huge. That would allow them to go out and do a whole lot more. Now, obviously, that is the big question. Jaire Alexander, who's one of the best corners in football when he's healthy, but he hasn't been healthy that often. There's plenty of teams out there that could use corners. I look at the Commanders, who made a big trade for Marshawn Lattimore. That would be a deadly duo over there. The Jets, I don't know how interested they'd be in trading for him, but pairing him next to Sauce Gardner would be really nice. You have a couple other teams that could really use a corner. There's a little bit of a corner deficiency in the NFL nowadays, but Jaire Alexander, someone that didn't really love playing with the Packers, it seems like, is probably going to be a little bit picky about wanting to go to a good team. So maybe the Chargers are one that comes to mind. The Chargers have the money for it. The Chargers are a team that made the playoffs, have looked really good under Jim Harbaugh since he came over last season. That's someone that I think might be pretty good for Jaire Alexander, but it's going to take a good amount. Jaire Alexander's still an elite player in the NFL, and the Packers aren't going to let him go for nothing. It also leaves them pretty weak at the corner position, as they have not just him, but they have two corners who are free agents, and Eric Stokes and Corey Ballantyne. Now, Stokes got a good amount of snaps, playing nearly 50% of the snaps last season. Corey Ballantyne didn't get too many, but he's a pretty good depth piece. Outside of those two corners, A.J. Dillon, who was injured last season, did not play as a free agent, probably going to be able to let go. Their starting center, Josh Myers, is a free agent, and that's an interesting one because the Packers were really good when it comes to the run game, and Josh Myers really good when it comes to the run game, but when it comes to the pass game, he gave up the third most pressures at the center position in the entire NFL, and he hasn't been great at that point. But he's someone that it's hard to lose a starting center in the NFL. There's not a lot of centers out there right now to go and replace him with, especially in this draft. Josh Myers is someone that might be pretty crucial for them to bring back this offseason. You also have linebacker Eric Wilson, kicker Brandon McManus, linebacker Isaiah McDuffie, and defensive tackle TJ Slayton, all as unrestricted free agents. These guys are all going to be free to go where they want. The Packers, with a lot of money, I think it'd be good to keep that defense together. One of their biggest weaknesses, and probably the thing that kept them from being true Super Bowl contenders last season with the team they had, was the fact that they didn't have a true pass rush threat, right? So if they don't want to lose that that weak off defensive line, maybe bringing back a guy like TJ Slayton would be important for them, right? Now, also, it was a weak defensive line, so you don't necessarily need to bring him back, but this is a big need for them in the offseason. In fact, so that's the biggest one. That's where I want them to spend all of their money and their draft picks if they're willing to do that. The other one that's interesting is wide receiver Bo Melton. He's a exclusive rights free agent this year. Bo Melton, who's kind of acted as a wide receiver 3 through 5 for this team. They've got a lot of those guys on the roster, a lot of those guys on their team. Bo Melton is a little bit expendable, honestly. He's probably the worst of the bunch, but not really by a wide enough margin that I feel comfortable saying that. But Bo Melton probably going to be let go this offseason unless they can bring him back on a cheap deal. But they do need to get a true wide receiver 1 as well. When we talk about free agents, right? One of the big things that I'm really interested in is Myles Garrett. I know he's not a free agent, but if they can pull off a Myles Garrett trade with the Browns don't seem interested in trading Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is absolutely not interested in staying with the Browns. The Browns offered him a contract that would have made him the highest paid defender in the NFL. He said no. He needs to go. The Packers are in the NFC, which ticks off one of the boxes if you're the Browns. I don't see the Browns trading him in the AFC. They've got the money for him. That would be huge. They could even get back Jair Alexander and probably a first-round pick if they wanted to get this deal done. That's a pretty good haul for Myles Garrett. I know they said that they aren't going to give him up. It's going to take more. If someone offered 2 first-round picks, they wouldn't pick up the phone. But Myles Garrett for Jair Alexander, a first and a third, I think that would be fair. That is a lot to give up for a guy, but I do think it's worth it because Myles Garrett is a difference maker. If you can go out, even if you don't get Myles Garrett, even if you do get Myles Garrett and get another elite pass rusher, spend a lot of money there, go and get Hassan Reddick, who's been near the top of the league in sacks when he plays. Go and get Josh Sweat coming off of a Super Bowl. Go and get one of those 2 guys, or maybe both if you don't get Myles Garrett. You also need a true wide receiver 1. Go hard at T. Higgins. Try and trade for him if the Bengals decide, hey, this isn't worth it, which they probably will or should. Stephon Diggs is available. I know that's a little bit more of an iffy situation, but I really do think that bringing in a guy like Diggs, a veteran presence who has the ability to be a wide receiver 1, would be huge for them. And lastly, a corner to replace Jair Alexander. I look at a DJ Reed. They've got the money to spend, especially if they move off of Jair Alexander. They can go out and get some big-name guys this offseason. When it comes to the draft, they pick at number 23. There's a couple guys to look at. Obviously, edge rushers are super important. If Mykel Williams from Georgia is available there, you snatch him up. At corner, Jahdae Barrett. He's someone that's been rising on draft boards, but he might be available at 23. If not, I don't really know if you take a corner in the first round. And then the wide receivers. It's going to be a question mark. I've seen drafts where Luther Burden out of Missouri and Emeka Egbuka fall all the way to the late teens. Maybe the Packers find a way to trade up there. Grab one of those guys if they want to get a true wide receiver 1 like Josh Jacobs had asked for. But maybe Egbuka falls, maybe Luther Burden falls. We see what happens at 23. That's kind of like the edge of their range anyway. I don't think they get to him. But if they can get those guys, it would be a steal at pick 23. Overall, this is a Packers offseason that I think is kind of really important, right? This is a Packers team that has been a top team in the NFC with Jordan Love. Jordan Love proved that he was worth that contract, especially at the end of the season when he stopped turning the ball over. Jordan Love has proved that he is a guy that you can rely on. Jordan Love has proved that he is a guy that can lead you to the playoffs and win you games, but you need to get a defense around him, and you need to find him a true number 1 option because as good as Christian Watson is, although he's going to miss a lot of the season, as good as Romeo Doubs is, these guys aren't good enough. As good as Jaden Reed is, these guys aren't good enough for them to rely on as number 1 options. They're all elite number 2 guys. They really are. And they've got a great wide receiver room, but you don't have a true number 1 alpha in that room, and you need that. You need that if you're the Packers. I think this is the offseason to get it. You've got the money to spend. Why not spend it now? But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the perfect Packers offseason is? we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we shift our attention to baseball. The Pittsburgh Pirates come off a season where they have the new coming of their franchise guy, Paul Skeens, a Rookie of the Year winner, a Cy Young candidate, as well as the rest of that team. We'll see what they do to improve around Paul Skeens this season. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, February 28th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over what the Packers' perfect offseason might look like. In this segment, we turn our attention over to baseball. What did the Pirates do this offseason, and what does that mean for the upcoming 2025 MLB year? But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, February 28th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into Paul Skeens and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, we start off with Paul Skeens because this is a team that was built, molded, and is supposed to be for him. They went 76-86 last season, finishing last in their division in the NL Central, of course, missing the playoffs. But this is a step up for a Pirates team that's kind of been stuck in neutral for a long time. They get a good prospect, they immediately trade him away, right? They get a good player, they trade him away. Hopefully with Paul Skeens, he is someone that they're going to build around instead of moving off from in the next couple years when it's time for him to get paid like the best pitcher in the league, because he's up there. Right now, Paul Skeens has improved himself even more. He added 2 new pitches to his arsenal. He now has 6 pitches in his back pocket. He basically only uses 5, though. He never uses his changeup. His best pitch, of course, is that splinker. The splinker that he developed is a crazy pitch, and everything else works off of that. He's got a fastball that goes over 100 miles an hour with ease. That one doesn't have a lot of movement on it. That's why he's coming up with these new pitches. The 2 pitches he added were a 2-seam fastball and a cutter. One for lefties, one for righties, so that you can go in on them and then use that splinker. These are huge. This is huge for him. He now has the ability to attack with a fast pitch and not just leave it hanging other than velocity. That's something that he might get into trouble in later moments in the game when he doesn't have the juice to throw 100 anymore. That is something that I think would be huge for him to get. They also were they were pretty active in free agency as well. They went out and they got starting pitcher Andrew Heaney on a 1-year, $5.25 million deal. He didn't have his best season last year. By WAR, it was his second best, but only 7 quality starts in 31 tries with the Texans last year. It's just not really a good look. I mean, he's going to be someone that's a solid late rotation guy, and with the rotation that they have, that is something that's going to be massive. But it's still not a needle mover. Neither is Tommy Pham. He's an outfielder. They brought him in on a 1-year, $4 million deal. He played on 3 teams last year. 248, 305, 368 triple slash. Not something that I'm looking at and I'm saying, wow, that's amazing. Adam Frazier they bring in. Tim Maiza they bring in. Adam Frazier, I really don't like. I don't think he's someone that I think is worth bringing in. Caleb Ferguson, they brought in on a 1-year, $3 million deal. He's a solid arm in the bullpen. They also brought in Tanner Rainey. I love Tanner Rainey. I'm a Nats fan, so he was part of that big World Series run, but he's not really a guy you want to rely on, and he's not projected to make the starting lineup. And then they brought back Andrew McCutchen. None of these moves really move the needle. They were supposed to go all in. They have the pitching staff to do it. You talk about a top 3 with Skeens, Mitch Keller, and Jared Jones. Oh my goodness, that is a dangerous top 3. But the rest of this team is just not ready. They made a couple trades. They went and got Emmanuel Valdez and Chase Sugart from the Red Sox. They gave away Matt McShane and Joe Vygotsky in 2 separate trades, as well as trading for utility guy Spencer Horwitz for the Guardians. They gave up a lot in this one for Luis Ortiz, Josh Hartle, and Michael Kennedy. Horwitz is someone that I think should come in and make a bit of a splash for them this season when it comes to the infield. But they lost a lot of key guys, especially in the bullpen. They lose Brian De La Cruz, Connor Joe, 2 outfielders, bench bats. They lose relief pitcher Ben Heller, relief pitcher Aroldis Chapman, and Jalen Beeks, as well as losing Yasmani Grandal, although these aren't too big of losses. This is a team that, again, like we've seen the Pirates be for a long time, just kind of stuck in neutral. This isn't a lineup that I look at and I'm extremely happy with. This isn't a lineup that I look at and I say, wow, this team is going to be great. This is a pitching staff that I think deserves to get some run support. Again, Paul Skeens at the top, Mitch Keller, Jared Jones in the top 3. We talked about Andrew Heaney as a solid 4. That's not bad. Bailey Falter at 5. Your 4-5's a little weak, but the top 3, you should be able to put a team around it. Instead, they have a lineup consisting of Tommy Pham, Brian Reynolds, O'Neal Cruz, Andrew McCutchen, Joey Bart, Andy Rodriguez, Nick Gonzalez, Brian Hayes, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. This is a solid defensive infield, especially with Brian Hayes and Kiner-Falefa over on the left side, but this is not a team that's going to be able to score runs, and that's the issue. This is a team that was supposed to go out and get better. Instead, they just kind of stayed in place. This is a team that has Henry Davis. I expect him to come up. He's not projected to play or start for them. He's someone I'd like to see get some more major league starting time. These are guys that they have. They just have not decided to move up with, and it's really going to hurt them. Right now, they're projected to go 75 and a half, win 75 and a half games. That's the same as last year, right? You have a really good closer in David Bednar. The rest of that bullpen is just kind of eh. You have a really good top of the rotation. The rest of that rotation is just kind of eh. You have some guys in the lineup that could hit. O'Neal Cruz is kind of a big iffy. If he makes contact, that thing goes a bajillion miles away. But he doesn't make contact all the time. Andrew McCutchen is getting older. He was just above average last year, just barely hit 20 home runs. Joey Bart has had a pretty big resurgence, but the rest of this lineup is nothing special. They can't really hit the ball. They're going to have solid defense if Brian Hayes can stay healthy, one of the best defensive third basemen in all of baseball, but still, it's just not good enough. And at the end of the day, they have to go spend money and surround Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller, and Jared Jones with some talent. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say I'm disappointed with this offseason. I think overall they didn't get better. They're probably going to be the same 74, 75, 76 wins this season, right around where they were last year, and it's not going to be enough to make the playoffs. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Pirates did this offseason? Was it worth it? Do you think they'll be able to make a big jump this year? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope everybody has a great weekend. We will be back on Monday, going more in depth on Matthew Stafford returning to the Rams, going more in depth on the NFL Scouting Combine as well as our post-combine mock draft 3.0 and everything else that happens over the weekend. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to